Let's take a look at my Midi toolbar. Starting from left to right, you see various sections, and we'll go through and talk about each one. But starting here with the menu, I have some functions that I've exposed for myself because I use them a lot. Select all tracks, remove empty tracks, rename instruments after selected tracks, and rename events after selected tracks. So those come in pretty handy, and I use them a lot, so I wanted to have those on my functions menu, and I may add some other things later. The next section here is simple transpose. Up an octave, down an octave, select some events, up an octave, down an octave. So for me, that's just an accessibility thing. I don't like having to remember too many key commands, so having transpose out on the toolbar is beneficial to me. The next section here is Strum, and I am not a big fan of Studio One's recent Strum feature addition for various reasons, but I have my own script for that, and I'll show you how it works. You simply select the notes in a chord, and you click Strum up or Strum down. Every click gives you a small step, and as you can see here, it's starting to increase the intervals for a strum. And if you also notice, the note off positions don't change, unlike the strum feature in Studio One. And the other good thing about this is, if I'm looping it, I can hear those changes in real time, and I can also use undo to slightly walk it back one step at a time if I go too far and I want to adjust the timing. So that all works out pretty well, the strum feature. The next section here is legato. And the reason I created my own legato function is because I had some practical issues with Studio One's legato function, and I'll explain. Let me go to the macro toolbar, and I'm going to select all of these notes and fire legato. Now, what happened was the performance got destroyed. This note, which is the same pitch as this note, got extended, which would mean this really would not play with my modern sample libraries because there's no gap there. And this note, which was almost a full bar away from the next note, got extended, so it really just destroyed the performance. So I'm going to undo that, and I'll go back to my Midi toolbar, and I'm going to fire my legato. Now what's going to happen here is that any adjacent notes with a gap greater than 1/8 will get ignored. So it will only perform legato if the space between two adjacent notes is 1/8 or less. And also this exclude function, it would only perform legato if two adjacent notes are not of the same pitch. So I'm going to select this, hit legato, and you see I have overlaps where I need them, no overlap here, no extension here, and overlaps where I need them. So for me, with this legato function, if I'm working on a really long cue, 90-second cue or something, I can just select the entire thing all the way across the track, click it once, and I'm done. As opposed to the Studio One function, where I'd have to select a group of notes, hit legato, select another group of notes, hit legato, and that gets to be a little bit tedious. So my legato function works much better for me in practice. The next section here is variations. And what this does is allow you to select any note. When you click this button, it will select all notes that are using the same sound variation. So for example, if I go here to the variations lane, you'll see that all of those notes are sustained. If I select this note, hit variations, it's going to select all of the same sound variation, in this case flutter tone. So when you do that, you can actually just go change them all at once to something else, or in the case of spiccatos and different things, you might want to go into the velocity lane and adjust velocity for all of those notes. But in any case, that comes in really handy for me to be able to select any note and multi-select all of the other notes of the same sound variation. This last part is note selection, and I'll go through and explain. Studio One's macro toolbar has note selection built into a dialog, and it works pretty well. I don't have any real complaint about this dialog except for the fact that it's a dialog. I generally hate modal dialogues. So, by having these functions accessible on the toolbar, it actually makes the workflow a little bit easier. And I'll explain why, but let's work this from right to left. Pitch is just simple range. Note pitch from X to Y. Select all pitches. Velocity, same thing, simple range, X to Y. And note length is where things start to change. So here I've added tolerance to note length. So for example, if I click this, it's going to select all notes between 1/64th and 1/4 with a tolerance of 0. So it's only going to select notes from 1/64th to 1/4. Now you see it missed some notes here because some of those notes are a little bit longer than 1/4. So I'm going to increase the tolerance here until I get the selection that I want. 1/28th, 1/64th. So as you can see, as I adjusted the tolerance, the note selection changed as I kept firing it. But I didn't have to open the dialog multiple times over and over to get the exact selection that I needed. And for me, that's the benefit of having it on a toolbar instead of a modal dialog, is that you can see the changes immediately and you can make small adjustments immediately. So this first part is matching. This is something that I wanted because I didn't want to have to worry about how long a note was. So for example, if I'm trying to match a note, I'll just select any note without any regard to its length and click match. And it's going to select all notes that match that length. This has tolerance, so let's do that again. I'm going to select any note and click match. And you see it, nothing matched because this note has no matches of the same length anywhere. I'm going to increase the tolerance. And you start to see the selection come into view. So you see how that could come in really handy. If you're working at a certain grid resolution and you see a small note like this, and you want to match all notes of the same length, you don't have to zoom out and change the grid and try to figure out, is that a 32nd note? Is that a 64th note? What is that? It doesn't matter. You just select it and hit match, and it'll match all notes of that same length. And because things are going to be a little bit off when people play, normally all the notes are not going to be quantized to the same length. You can use the tolerance here to help to zero in on your selection without having to open and close the dialog multiple times. So that works out really well for me.